Welcome to another Aziz podcast. I'm your host, Khalid Aziz, and our aim is to bring you valuable leadership insights through what we hope are great conversations with some of our expert coaches. And today I'm pleased that we're joined by David Bottomley and Anna Brown, and we'll be discussing navigating life transitions. Let's meet them first of all and hear about their background. So, Anna, tell us about your background.
Hi, great to be here. So I'm an executive coach and I specialize in transition. So I work with people from all different industries and professions and really sort of working with them and helping them to step through big challenges that they face, but also potential opportunities that they have in those life transitions.
David.
Hi everybody, I'm David. I'm a leadership and business and personal coach, and very much like Anna, most of my clients are coming for help through a significant life transition, whether that's work related or personal transition. So I help people navigate through those to their own best outcomes.
Good. Well, let's talk about the most common challenges that leaders face during their facing a major career change, or indeed after they've been told that their services are no longer required. David, kick us off.
Yeah, transitions come in different shapes and sizes, don't they? There are some that we take with our own initiative, where we decide, for example, to change our job or change careers. And then there are those which are thrust upon us, if you like, particularly redundancy of role or where we exit an organisation, not necessarily because we wanted to. And I think while there are some similarities there, I think obviously our psychological response to those two different situations are quite different. Having said that, I think they both present ultimately, in my experience, and I've been through them like everybody else has, I'm sure, as Anna said in her introduction, it's all about making the most of that opportunity and turning that to our own advantage from a life and career perspective.
And Anna, common challenges that you've seen?
I think there's something really fundamental about the change of terrain that they're going to be experiencing. So there's as humans, we really sort of flourish in familiarity to an extent. And as much as people might say that they relish change, the reality is actually we find it quite difficult being thrust into new environments. So there's a real factor there in slightly losing a sense of yourself in that new context that is experienced from what I've noticed, particularly with the people I've worked with.
I'm going to put redundancy to one side. We'll come back to that in a moment. But I think I would like to particularly draw on my experience in recent years, where I've spent a lot of time helping people who are on some kind of succession pathway, and they're expected to step up. It can be in as little as 6 to 12 months, but often it's several years. They're on a path to becoming the next CFO or the next COO, and sometimes the next CEO. And what I find is that getting people to recognize the changes that are required when what's got them to where they are to be considered for these new roles is not necessarily going to be the same skill set that is going to get them that next role. And what I'm really talking about now is the fact that people, by and large, in a meritocratic world, are promoted on the basis of their technical ability. But actually, as I say to some of my clients, it's not your ability now that's going to account for so much. It's your club ability, the ability to get on with people, to have people being net promoters of you, and trying to help people understand that there's a sort of a matrix of people around them. Some will be negative, some will be positive, some will be neutral. And the whole idea is to make sure that you can get as many into the net promoter score, as it were, of you, to make sure you will continue on that. And that, in a way, will shape you anyway. But shaping people, do you find you get much pushback from people who say, well, I am what I am, they'll have to take me as they find me, sort of thing?
To some extent, yeah. I guess there's different things there, aren't there? I encourage people to be themselves and understand what their core personality values are, because they don't need to change as we move up an organisation, but clearly how we act and how we behave and how we develop. You're talking, Khalid, about the need for interpersonal understanding, for empathy, for emotional intelligence, particularly kicks in, doesn't it, as we move from being technical through to management, through to leadership, because we get that progression, don't we? Particularly executives become leaders, not just managers. But being authentic, I guess, so keeping our authenticity, but knowing how to act successfully.
It's a big conundrum for people, this business of authenticity. They don't want to come across as being a fraud, Anna, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I say to people, it's a change of orientation. It's not necessarily a change of fundamentally who you are. And sort of building on what both of you have said, really, that, what's got you to where you are now is not going to get you to where you need to be next. There's a saying, I can't remember what it is exactly, but it's so important that it's shifting really from you will have been the person doing and delivering, particularly with a technical expertise. And now actually it's how you're being, it's your leadership approach, because actually people may be moving to be leading teams that they have no knowledge of the technical expertise of that team, and yet they need to be convincing at leading that new team. So it's absolutely possible to continue to be authentic. It's just a shift in orientation is the way that I talk about it.
Yes, I mean it is fundamentally about seeing yourself as other people see you, and understanding the difference between what you say when you're at one level in the organization and how you're perceived for the same set of words said in the same way at another level in the organization. I remember I had a client once who was sent to us more for, I say sent because he was sent, because they saw it as a big blocker in the organization to his progress, because he would leave a verbal bombshell on the table as he left the room, something along the lines of, he'd done a very good presentation and so on and so forth. And then as he left the room, he'd say something like, well, if you believe that, you believe anything, which he meant as just a joke. But given his status in the organization, it left people going, oh my, what did he really mean? What's that about? It made people very anxious and nervous. So, one has to be very self-aware, and teaching more self-awareness is a big issue. How do you find when you're talking with people who come up through a professional route, accountants, lawyers, and so on, how do you help them shift their mindsets to the new mindset, the new paradigm that's required from going from technocrat to manager to leader?
That's a much more challenging, in some ways, that's a much more challenging because, I mean, there are certain contexts like, professional services, like, you mentioned with medical field, architects, you've got to where you are because your increased level of expertise in whatever the topic might be. And so it's almost baked into the culture. And so you're almost swimming against the tide. It makes it even more challenging to reorient to being in a way of being where you're managing the process by which strategies happen and people deliver, rather than doing the work yourself. And it's where coaching comes in, actually, and can be the most powerful in walking alongside somebody who's experienced in that, because it can often feel like you're doing it wrong. I think in expert cultures, there is often more a right and wrong way to do something. And so people can be quite tough on themselves through this next stage in the career, because actually it almost feels like they're right-handed and they're suddenly starting to write with their left hand, or they're having to be ambidextrous. And so having support with, somebody who does this work day in, day out with executives in multiple fields, it can be much more it can be reassuring and normalizing to help with that process.
And do you find it difficult sometimes when you've got someone who's so obviously, when they come under pressure, dive back into their comfort zone, which is being a technocrat? Oh no, you don't want to do it like this. Do it like this. Let me show you how to do it. And thereby disempowering the people they're supposed to be bringing on.
Yeah, I think, that whole move away from having to know everything and being able to manage everything personally, because, obviously that becomes impossible, doesn't it? As the scope of the job increases, we cannot possibly command control every detail of the team or the organisation that we are heading up. So I think that whole realisation, I see this in people when they suddenly realise, okay, I can no longer be the expert. I can't base my reputation on what I know. My credibility is based on how I lead and how I manage, and particularly, as we said at the beginning, how I relate to people and how I can make things happen in the organisation through influencing people, rather than, I used to be a software developer once upon a time, and I became a tech director. So that whole lesson away from the actual me doing it through to leading people who lead people who do it is a really important mindset shift that I think coaching is critical to that. I really do.
Well, I remember years ago we experimented with a very famous football coach whose name you would recognize if I was to tell you, because I thought actually in the field of IT that this was in the very early days where I had these sort of 40 and 50 something managers saying to me, "I've got these IT people. I know computers are the future, but I've got no idea what they're about, and they're all young and they wear t-shirts and they're funny, they're odd people, and I don't know what to do." So I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to get a top flight, football coach? And I happen to know him. He was a Premier League manager. I said, "Do you want to give this a go? Because you seem to be extremely good at getting young people who are very focused on only one thing, which was football and playing football, to work together as a team." And whilst he was very good at that, he could not distill and bottle what it was he was doing and roll it out in a business environment, which was a shame because I thought I hit an holy grail there, but I didn't. It's very, very tough, that. Can we talk now about people who are coming back into business? I'm thinking particularly women who are coming back after a career break to have children or whatever. And I don't want to sort of sexualize this as such, but do you get called upon to do this because you're a woman, or do you think can men do this? Or is it not a possibility? And what should we be saying? Help us out here.
I think if one is able to empathise, that's really sort of the key thing here. And I come back to work after having 2 children, and in fairly quick succession, and I ended up coming back full time, and then after my second child part time. And it it's so surprising the effect that it can have on you when you go back into the workplace. So you've been very confident in your abilities, and you've literally created a new human being. The most amazing thing anyone can create. And yet somehow what it does is it really affects your confidence. And so it's really important and helpful to put support in place for people to, get land back into the environment. Because it could be that, if it can be anywhere up to a year or more that they can be outside of the workplace. And all sorts of things have changed. And it's really hard to keep people updated on things. So the context is changing, but also the individual themselves has changed, because you just reevaluate your life when you're starting to care for somebody. But I think that's also true with people that come back from a protracted illness. It can similarly affect people. And having that sort of transitionary support is really important.
Yes, I mean, we do quite a lot of maternity coaching at Aziz. They're mainly female coaches that do it, but I don't think necessarily that should be exclusive. But it is a challenging area, and the whole issue with somebody's had, well, I mean, like the king, a cancer diagnosis, or indeed the Princess of Wales, cancer diagnosis. You step back, you have your treatment, and you come back in. It's tricky stuff, and it can be over a long period of time. David, any insights from your point of view on this coming back?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I took breaks in my career, and not to have children particularly, but because breaks arrived due to switching between roles. I think it is, and I think, Anna, you alluded to this. There's a positive potential here as well, isn't there, in terms of reevaluating what's really important to you, taking a bit of a breather, and then perhaps coming back to work with a maybe more rounded view of your work, and bringing that into the workplace because you've stepped away from it and you've perhaps seen it from a perspective that you hadn't seen it before. So I think there's positive learning, if you like, or development can come from a break in working as well.
Let's talk about personal branding now. A lot of talk about the brand of the individual. Evolving your brand with career transition can be quite tricky. Should people try it, or should they just stay as they are?
I'm slightly allergic to that terminology, I have to say. It just seems so contrived. I think for me, it's a difficult one. I think balancing with someone being authentically themselves, we have to really go into, who are they, when they authentically show up as themselves, and what flex can they sort of develop as part of the coaching process to be able to sort of navigate different scenarios, different settings. I think there is a way of, I guess, assessing how you might show up in a different environment. I think it's a bit tricky for me anyway on the calling it personal branding.
David, do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, I guess behind the question is it is how we show up, isn't it? And like Anna is saying, it is all about knowing ourselves, being comfortable in our own skin. That might be an area where our inhibiting factor is our confidence, but it's for me, and my brand was, being authentic, knowing what my strengths were and what they weren't, and knowing what my core values were, and trying my best to be, the person I'd want to be for myself and for my team. And hopefully that transitioned from one organisation to another quite well. But being aware, I guess, of the pond in which we're swimming and making sure that comes through in an effective way in a culture that might be quite different.
Now, it has to be said, sometimes we get people who feel that their skills are so wonderful that they're eminently transferable. They can transfer to anything, nothing they can't do. Are skills really transferable?
I think they are, but we can't be good at everything either, can we? So it's back to how well do we know ourselves, where our strengths are, our super strengths, maybe our strengths, and where we will need some complementary people in our teams and amongst our colleagues, so that as a unit and as a team we can be successful.
Anna?
Yeah, one of the real significant things that I notice in this sort of scenario is actually, when I'm working with people over a period of time and they've shifted into a new career, often the one thing that's not thought about is what is the organizational culture of the new organization, and what is it about the where they were before that they found difficult or they enjoyed, and in a strange way, it's so much of the focus is placed on their skill set, the role, and perhaps the team, but actually the wider climate, the wider sort of invisible way things are done can often have the biggest effect on whether someone succeeds or doesn't succeed, I've noticed.
So identifying the culture and stepping back and assessing what it is and analysing the elements of it are vital. I suppose one of the things I say to people is, look, increasingly, it isn't about the what, it's how you empathise with people, and your people skills need to go. I remember years ago doing what I suppose you would have called a podcast if we knew what the name was in those days. It was actually a series of video cassettes, which I was asked to make by Sir John Harvey Jones. With him, I was his interlocutor, and we had sort of hundreds of hours of the wisdom of John Harvey Jones, who was famous for the Troubleshooter series on TV way back. And he had some fairly salty language, being ex-Navy, about things, but he actually used to say, it isn't all about numbers. It is actually about other things. He said if it was all about numbers, all we'd need to run businesses is a jolly big computer, although he didn't use the word jolly. I've always taken that away with me, saying building these personal skills, which often in the discipline of being brought up as an accountant gets sort of rather trained out of you. You're expected to be impersonal. And in fact, that's quite the reverse of what's needed as you get your higher up career breaks. Yeah, it's quite a tricky thing. Can we talk about networking now? Because that's another thing I find is that with people who are probably now under 50, they've been brought up with so many screens, they don't talk to people anymore. And then when they have to talk to people, they find that quite tricky. What strategies do you give your clients for that? David?
I think, yes, get out and meet people, but as well as using the advantage of digital communication, because the advantage of that is we can reach much further, can't we? And it's more efficient. But I very much encourage people to talk, on video, on Zoom, rather than just message. I think also keeping your network as broad and as wide as you can, and not just stick within your own sector and your own industry. Because that's always good to get different perspectives, isn't it? But also in that situation where you want to jump to a different world, you've got those contacts in place.
And Anna, do you think this whole business of echo chambers and preaching to the choir is probably one of the biggest curses around at the moment, where people are in silos and they're talking to each other, and because of algorithms on our screens now is all about it all curated for us according to what we've already watched, as opposed to what we might watch that might be a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue those silos also work. People so often are so busy doing the doing in the organisation that they're in that all of their contacts are within the parameters of the network of the organisation or in the industry that they're in. And so it makes it really challenging, but to sort of step out of that and see the benefit of it, but actually talking to somebody who does a job that is so unrelated to your own, if you're open about it and can think about what's the learning here, has real potential to, give a different perspective. I mean, I find it particularly interesting to talking to people who are gardeners, because the way that they approach the task at hand is just so fascinating, but it also has so many useful lessons for leadership, to my mind. And so if we use that sort of learning culture in expanding beyond the narrow sort of space that we're used to, it really can make a difference to jumpstart actually a different level of learning.
Yes, it's the classic, isn't it? Us amateur gardeners who look at the packet of seeds and it says sow from March to May or something, and you say, well, it's March. And then, of course, it's freezing cold outside, and if you sow the seeds, nothing's going to happen. And this concept in business of actually waiting for the time to be right is something that we, to launch something is something we sometimes lose because it's got to be done now. Well, maybe it doesn't. That's quite an interesting one. Of course, the whole market is changing all the time. The jobs market is changing all the time. Like it or not, a lot of jobs either don't get advertised, or if they do, they're being advertised by bots and so on. A few thoughts now on how people can stay future ready, as it were, and adaptable in these hugely uncertain times. Anna?
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with an executive recently, actually, who's very much what I would call a sort of typical generalist. She has so skilled in so many different ways, and that's the sort of the rich contribution she makes to the role she's in right now. And she's looking for the next opportunity. And the thing that really struck me is that quite often the roles that get advertised are those ones that are finance director, marketing director, the clearly defined ones that have you can write a job description and a job advert around. And so it's very much a different sort of relational connection build to get into a role for a generalist. It's quite a challenging one to sort of navigate that sort of change from one organization to another, or even across a multinational type organization, is to sort of, it's not, these roles don't tend to be advertised. It is through connection, through introductions.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? So being spotted, staying alert, putting yourself about, all very important stuff. David, anything to add?
Yeah, not really. I think. I mean, clearly, LinkedIn is an opportunity, isn't it, to raise your profile. One of the challenges with LinkedIn is you only have one profile. So tailoring, I do a lot of work with clients to tailor their profile so it's really clear what they are looking for without closing too many doors. And I think it's a skill in presenting yourself with your expertise and your achievements, but without too narrowly defining yourself. Because with a CV, of course, you can have 5 different CVs, can't you? But I agree with the general point, that far better to find the opportunities through networking before they're advertised and before you're in competition with X number of people. Particularly if you're moving from one career to another, if you are competing with people for the same role with people who've done that career 5 times, done that experience 5 times before, you'll struggle to land that position. So I think it's more about presenting yourself to an organisation so that organisation wants to employ you.
Yes, and I'm going to say something which the headhunters won't like, but so be it. Headhunters are notoriously risk averse, so they won't put somebody forward if they don't think they have, and the word they use is entitlement for the role. And I remember talking to somebody not so long ago as a client, and this individual was an expert and had got such a track record in their own business, which is a large 2 billion cap business, at customer experience stuff, actually affecting real good change in customer experience. And they wanted to move for all sorts of reasons. And I sort of said, well, okay, what are you really good at? And you're good at customer experience. This is the transferable skill. So why don't you, I said, but you'll never get it if you go via a headhunter, because they'll be looking for somebody in the same sector that you're already in, and you don't particularly want to be in the same sector. Also, your business is leading in that sector. So why don't you write to the chairman, not the chief executive, but the chairman of a business that you admire, who you could bring, in your view, some of your expertise to bear and improve their business? because the chairmen are particularly looking strategically rather than, what's going to happen next month. And that's paid off huge dividends for this individual. Because not only that, it's all about the Swiss cheese holes lining up, but of course, there has to be opportunity. They're meeting a lot of different people, which cannot be bad. So that's all good. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left. Let's just have some key lessons on all of this career transition stuff. Anna, start us off.
Yeah, I think know yourself. It's really important to sort of have a good sense of your style, your leadership style, but also your skill set. I think that's quite important. I guess also willing to experiment. So are there ways that you can do some, have meetings, have conversations, dip your toe in to get a sense of, if you don't have a clear answer on what the next step might be, so you can get a sense of what it might look like if you head in a particular direction.
Good. Thank you. David?
I was going to say know yourself, but also look after yourself in terms of self-development. So, it's easy, isn't it, to get focused on the job in hand in that particular organisation. But spend time networking outside your organisation, spend time developing your own skill set, spend time learning, and look after yourself so that when you do want to move to a new career, you're well positioned and you've got your confidence and you've got those transferable skills nicely tuned for your next move.
Well, Anna Brown, David Bottomley, thank you both very much indeed. And thank you for tuning into this podcast. If you want to find out more about Aziz Corporate and the services we offer, or to get in touch with Anna or David, please contact us at hello@azizcorp.com. And you can also visit our website, which is also called azizcorp.com. Thanks very much for being with us.